Yeah. Okay, good morning.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm good. How is it?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, as my previous mate said,
Yeah.
we are really very happy to have you as our teacher here.
Oh,
And we have learned a lot from you. Yeah,
yeah,
we learned something that is really very important to
yeah,
deal with some issue in our environment.
yeah.
So it's really very awesome and wonderful. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
I can guarantee you, Paul and other colleagues here, if you ever go for a job interview and even mention
Yes.
issues around, you have to think about problems because we think about problems in a linear way, but problems are more complex than they are. If you think about planning, we plan with yesterday in mind. But if you start planning with the future in mind, you probably will get better results. If you
Yeah.
start using that kind of language, I can guarantee you will be the person picked for the job because the 21st century skills require us to think, sorry, to think or to speak or to somebody. Rebecca, okay, oh, good. Yeah, so it requires us to think in a certain way and to see things in a certain perspective. And everybody is looking for answers and solutions. And so some of these tools are really the big winners for 21st century kind of problem solving and winners. So you are ahead of the curve in terms of, when it comes to young people. Okay, Lawrence, I think there's a request from Hernaina on the chat, if you want to look at that. Okay, thanks, Paul. Anybody else?
Hi, Dr. Francisca.
Hi, Francisca, how are you?
How are you? I'm doing fine. So, for me,
I'll start teaching this class in Kiswahili. Anyways, yes?
so for me, it's opened up my knowledge based on some of these things. I realized that I came across a lot more of futures thinking whenever I attend high profile programs. And I realized I wasn't lost at all because these are things I was dealing with, I was learning, and I knew about. And
Yeah,
it helped me to blend in even at how profile it is. And I'm
yeah.
very grateful for this knowledge I've gained. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, yes, you're right. Today, if you go to any UN World Bank meeting, this is the kind of language they're using, systems thinking, and even they are struggling a lot in terms of, the let's say like the solutions they've been prescribing for countries, they are not working anymore. So they are also looking for answers, and they are using this kind of thinking, this kind of language to also try and see what is the best way forward. So it's true, when you go to those meetings, if you have been to this class, you won't feel so lost about those issues because it's and I don't want you to think about it the way you would pass a chemistry exam or a physics exam by cramming it. The idea is to learn how to use these tools to think about solutions. Okay, and if you do that, I think you'll be in a very good place. Okay, I think we can start the class now. I think we are 15 people, and we seem to have slightly different timings, but this I thought is my last class, so we shall confirm that. But and in this, oh, sorry, I think I have the last slide. Oh yeah, it's the first one. So in this class, basically, I was preparing to just like sort of like consolidate everything we have learned and then see, so what, or what's the way forward. And the class is actually titled How It All Comes Together. And so I needed us to do a recap of everything we have done, because the expectation when we started this class was that at least we wanted to help you get started with identifying a community problem that either you're in charge of or a community project that you're interested in, and to help you get started to unpack whether how to write a proposal, how to think about the problem, how to work through it until you find real solutions that can be implemented. And so it's a basis for you to whether develop proposals, or a work strategy that you can use. For example, if you work in YMCA and you're in charge of a program like reproductive health, you can use this material to design a very good reproductive health program and process. And if you want, you can use this to try and fundraise and look for, then of course, work with young people to try and get very tangible solutions that will actually bring the change you're looking for in your community. And so we combined this futures thinking, because futures thinking is about planning and strategy. That's why we overanalyze problems. But the other thing that you must do is really pay attention to think place, and they're going to come back and, sort of like tie up from where I have left to, and then give you more information. But using that knowledge and the knowledge by think place and the knowledge I have given you, you are able to even lead very successful and transformational programs in your community. And that is our desire, that we can work with Africa's young people to do that, because for a long time, Africa has been waiting for saviors, donor funding, or I don't know, white people to come and help us. But I think the continent belongs to us. As you know, Africa has the youngest population. And so it is upon us to really, really figure out how do we want our continent to be in the future and what must we do differently. So that's the reason why now I'm tying this together, so that at least so that it's not in pieces and in bits, but now you can see the full picture. And I think when I started with you, apart from talking about what is foresight, we started with hindsight. And we say that hindsight is a review of the past, and you do that to get insight. But somebody tell me, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, and I'm going to ask Lawrence for every questions that you answer, whether on the chat or on the... by the way, are you seeing my slides?
I'm not seeing it.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I've been talking for a long time. Okay, sorry about that. I'm very sorry. Also, anyway, I hadn't gone far. So does anybody recall what we said about hindsight? Oh, sorry, Maritu. Sorry, I didn't realize it. I've just realized that you may not be seeing it now. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, all right. So the slides for today. Sorry, there seems to be a problem. Sorry, let me just bring back. So anyway, as I try to bring my screen back, what did we say hindsight is about? What are some of the things we said about hindsight? So Lawrence is going to be giving points for every question you answer, whether it's on the chat or on the or verbally, you're going to get points, okay? And that goes to your final sort of like performance. So what did we say hindsight is about?
I think we said it's a review of the past.
Okay, but what else did we say? Because at least that is on my screen.
We talked.
Hi, Doctor.
Hi.
I think we also talked about hindsight being a way of understanding issues or events after they have happened.
Yes, Francisca, thank you. You're understanding issues after they have happened. Why do you want to do that?
Doctor, is it to me?
Yes, yes. Anybody, but yes, if you want to answer.
So for me, I would like to understand issues after it has happened so that in the near future I can make different decisions or choices, which is going to prevent me from making mistakes that I already made in the past.
Yeah, so you're using the past. Of course, the past helps you to learn some of the things to avoid and some of the things to continue, isn't it? But also the past dictates what the future, what the present looks like, isn't it? It helps you explain some of the things that are happening now. So if you think about Africa's unemployment, it is not an accident. In the 80s, when we didn't have such a high demand for jobs, it's because Africans were giving birth to so many children. But somehow governments were not thinking about when these children grow up, what are going to be the needs that they have. So the policy concentrated so much on maternal and child health. It never really transitioned and prepared to do youth reproductive health issues, but also the needs of young people, which includes looking for employment and issues of higher education. And that's why now we have a crisis. Why? The crisis now is as a result of what happened in the past. So the past also helps you to explain the present, but it helps you also to understand why some of the things are happening the way they are. But then what are the dangers of, while it's good to understand things from a perspective from the past, why is it important not to sort of like over rely on the past? Thanks, Abadudu. I can see you're saying it's a link between the past, present, and future. I agree. But why is it not good to over rely on what can I say? On the past. What did we say about that? Anybody?
Doctor, I want to try.
Yes, Francisca.
So I think one thing we need to be cautious of is there have been different dispensations in our world.
Yeah.
And the way things happened, let's say in the 70s, is not the same way the world is today.
Yeah.
And previously, there were no computers. Technology was not really a thing. But now technology has come, and it seems it has come to stay. So when you are gathering hindsight, you must consider these things. If you depend on it so much, then you might come out with understanding which will be different or might not related to issues of the present due to different happenings and different dispensational.
Exactly. So Francisca today is getting all the points, eh? So yes, it's true that the past does not necessarily continue in the future. And so some of the things that have happened in the past will not necessarily be relevant in the future. And so while it is good to look at the past, it's important that you don't over rely on the past. So Maritu, you're saying, because sometimes things change in the future, so we cannot always, yes, think about situations that are going. Yes, Gaia. Somebody mutes Gaia. Okay. Yeah, so Abadudu is saying unpredictable occurrences or events make it difficult, yes, to fully rely on hindsight. Thank you very much. I think there's an understanding there. And so one of the ways in which we discussed how you can understand the past is to use some tools like what we call a trends analysis. And a trends analysis is whereby, does anybody remember what a trends analysis is? I'm giving you a chance to really, good morning, Tafazwa. I'm giving you a chance to really get this point. So anyone wants to try and say what a trends analysis is about? Gaia, good morning. Those who have not spoken. The reason I want this class to be very interactive is because we are doing a recap. And I just want to test whether you've been following and understanding what we've been learning. So if we could do this faster so that we finish the class on time, it would be helpful. Trends analysis, people.
Good morning, though.
Good morning.
Trends analysis is the widespread practice of collecting information and attempting to spot a pattern.
Yes. So thank you very much, Gloria. You get a point for that. So yes, you're collecting data. You want to understand patterns and to uncover the reasons why some of these things have occurred, okay? So data can help you. And one of the assignments I gave you is what are the historical facts that have happened on the issue that you're working on? And what are the consequences of that history? So we looked at food security, and we're saying, if you look at Tanzania and you look at just some of the things that have happened around food security, you notice that, for example, this is land. Tanzania had a lot of land per person. You know, it was about on average 8. And actually, I feel like this is an underestimation. But you can see that over time, average farm sizes have been decreasing over time, so that, you know, the land, what we call land per capita, meaning the land owned by, on average, by one person, has been decreasing, you know, to about 1.7 kilometers squared. So that in itself, if you're thinking about food security, what does it tell you? If you're thinking about food security and you look at related data, and one of the things you see is, you know, land per person has been decreasing, what does that begin to tell you?
Hi, doctor.
Hello.
Okay, so I believe if the land size decreases, it means there will be smaller land for farming, which will imply that in the near future or in present, lesser food will be produced than in the past.
Exactly. So anyone who has done, there's something we call economies of skill. Thank you, Francisca. There's something we call economies of skill. And economies of scale is whereby you get more productivity if your land is bigger, right? So that means that if the lands are becoming smaller, it means the issue of food security might actually be in jeopardy, okay? That's a probability based on just looking at the data that you're observing. Let's see another pattern. This is another pattern we uncovered. We were looking at food production in relation to food demand in Tanzania. What did this graph tell you, for example? Thanks, Abadudu. I can see your chart, and Linda, I can see your contribution as well. What are the trends like? What is this graph telling you about the past on food demand and production?
It's that the demand covers the production covers the demand.
Yes, thanks, Kamara. Yes, that the demand, actually, Tanzania has largely not had access to food issue because the demand usually has been almost the same as food production. So that has been the past. And then, of course, you want to now go deeper and say, okay, this is what I'm observing. Remember, what we are uncovering earlier was observing. Okay, so what we want to ask yourself, what is the data? What is the deeper meaning of this data? And so the deeper meaning obviously is that, you know, you're trying to make sense. And I think we have already started doing that. The average farm sizes have become 4.5 times smaller than they were in independence. And obviously we're also saying that another thing is that the population is increasing. That means people are subdividing the land, and that's why the land sizes are becoming smaller. So you are trying to deduce meaning out of the patterns that you are seeing. Okay, this is just additional data, and there is always data. If you want to be a good futurist or a strategist, you must make data, especially what comes out of the national statistics. You must always try and look at what the data is telling you. So in one of the trends that we were seeing is that the cost of food actually during COVID rose up. This was in Kenya, it rose up to 12 times in the first quarter of COVID compared to what the same period in 2019. Now, something else even to observe in Africa is that drought periods have become shorter. Shorter meaning that while in the 1980s, drought used to happen every 10 years. In Africa now, drought and severe drought is happening almost every 2 years. That means that the harsh climatic conditions are also, in addition to reducing sizes of farms, in addition to more people, or a bigger population that is demanding more food, there is climatic conditions that are becoming harsher every so often. And so what we are trying to say, just looking at the issue of food security, is that maybe in the future, the biggest, can I say, asset anybody will have is to be able to have access to good, nutritious food at an affordable cost. Why? Because the data is already telling us that access to food is going to be a real issue everywhere in Africa in the next few years. So again, we are saying that you must use this data to even dig deeper about what are the insights we must get, as we go along. And one of the insights is that households will become food poor if they do not increase production, and drought has become more frequent, hence more disruption. So we must look, for example, any government that wants to survive in the 21st century must stop looking at, food production relying, for example, on rain. And we must start thinking about what technologies can we use to increase food production, without relying on natural factors like rain or even soil, because those are being disrupted at a very, very fast rate. Again, we are also saying that in Tanzania, if you dig deeper, yes, they have access to food, but it also is one of the countries that has high malnutrition, because what is happening is that people are not consuming healthy food, so they are not balancing their diet. So if I was working, for example, on food security in Tanzania, while Tanzanians, pride themselves in having access to food compared to people in Kenya, maybe a bigger issue in Tanzania is, yes, to tell them in the future, maybe the case of access to food may not be as much as it is now, so they need to prepare. But the second thing I would educate the people on is, can we eat right? Can we eat right so that people are healthy in Tanzania? Do you see how we use data? And then, of course, as you get the deeper meaning from trends, you have to, one of the biggest things you have to do is look at how the interrelated issues are working together. So for example, when you're dealing with food security, you have to look at it. And I think we learned about systems thinking, whereby you must ask yourself, okay, I'm looking at the issue of food, but what are the things that are related to food that I must unpack? Food is a factor of production. So you must think about land and the labor that goes into it, and the prices and the farm inputs, the transportation, all those things that, lead to food production. You must think about, food as a factor of, consumption. And consumption here, you're like, okay, even if we produce food, what are people eating? And I can tell you, actually, there's so much creativity you can do, even creative businesses that you can start. If you think about how consumption has changed, for example, you will realize that the modern African is consuming more, can I say junk food? I don't know if Hernaina, that is a word that you can translate, but more non-traditional foods because of the issue of globalization. And so what is happening, the current trend is that people are moving away from maize and beans, which is what we produce, and are consuming more of the potatoes, the chicken, and not that to say those are not traditional, but we are doing it in a much more modern way. So one would want to look at how is food consumption changing and what is that telling me about the today and about the future, okay? So basically it's to look at any issue that you are talking about from that broad perspective. And then it means that you have to look at, like I've said all that, you have to look at now this issue from different perspective, and you have to keep asking the different questions. Like one of the methodologies we use is to keep asking why, until you really get to the bottom of things. So it's not good enough to stop at past trends. We have to go into the future trends. And if you think about future trends, again, it's looking at patterns that might occur in the future. And you can find all this stuff on the internet if you look. And so we are looking at, for example, population in, let's say, Tanzania. And we are saying that Tanzania's population will grow to 123 million from how many people? From about 50 million or 60 million people now. So if that is the case, that Tanzania's population will grow by another, maybe even 2.5 times, what does that mean for the production? It means that, for example, land sizes will continue to decrease as people grow. It means that demand will continue to grow, but it looks like if they don't do anything about improving production, it looks like their demand will surpass production. And so that means that Tanzania, if it doesn't do something now about food, it is going to be a starving country in the next few years, even if it has been one of the most, successful countries since independence to be able to have, food production, optimum food production. So this should, if I was a government advisor, this is one of the priorities. And this is one of the ways in which I would be advising governments to think through solutions, okay? And I think we talked to one of our colleagues, I don't know whether he's on the call today, and he confirmed this data. So again, I gave you an assignment, and the assignment, so one of the things I'd like to see is how did you use data to discuss your issues? What are the patterns you saw in the past? What are the patterns you are seeing in the future? And what are those patterns telling you about your issue? So that's something I want to see in your work. Are we together, everybody? We also said that trends analysis can fail because sometimes we are biased, okay? So sometimes you only choose data of the same thing. So if I'm talking about food security, if I choose data only about food, it means I'm not learning deeply about what's happening in that sector. So unless I'm also looking at, yes, food, but other related data, I will fail. Then choosing data from one source. Somebody tell me, why is this a danger? Choosing data from one source. Rigobati, I can see your contribution. What is the danger of using one source of data?
I think that because some sources can have the recent data, and the other ones can have the past ones. And if you just look at one source, you can miss the recent data.
Yes, that's one of the reasons, Kamara. Thank you very much. Any other reason? Okay, Ebenezer from Ethiopia, you're saying it is not reliable. Yes, Francisca?
So relying on one source of data is quite dangerous because there might be false information or truthful information or inaccurate information. And when you rely on that, maybe your deductions from your study might be wrong. It's
Yeah.
better you seek data from different sources, compare and know that you are working with the right information. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Francisca, for that. It's true. And I have said before that data can be a political issue. I don't know, one of the trends that is happening in Africa right now is African presidents have been doing what is called, or governments have been doing what is called rebasing. Have your governments done that? Rebasing is where you recalculate using data to move yourself from a poor, least developed country to a lower middle income country. How many countries in Africa have become in the past 10 years lower middle income countries? Kenya is one of them. I suspect Nigeria might be one of them, if I'm not wrong. Ghana, has your government done that? Ghana, anyone in Ghana, from Ghana?
Doctor, as far as I know, Ghana is not considered a low-income country for some time now.
For some time, yeah. It's because countries are rebasing. And the reason for that is not because countries have improved. It's actually because people want to use data, apply a different formula, so that it's for political reasons, so that African, like those governments can look like they are working, or like they have improved the economy. Does that make sense? So unfortunately, they do that using a mathematical formula. But when you go to the countries, you realize that people are as poor as they were when we were a least developed country. So what I'm trying to say, somebody wanted to speak, Linda? Was it Linda or who? Linda, did you want to say something? Okay. Yeah. So the point to make here is that data can be a political issue. And so you want to use different sources of data on the same thing so that you can sort of like affirm that it really is the correct picture if you're not the one who has collected it yourself. Okay. And then data interpretation is also some place. There are people, we can look at the same data. Depending on what you are looking for, we can have a very different interpretation. So some of us, and I think we talked about this in one of the classes, and I'm going to cover it, is the issue of biases. Some of us are biased, and we don't realize the biases that we are bringing into our data or our interpretation of things. And it is important to check whether you are a neutral person when it comes to interpretation of data. So for example, if what example can I give? If let's say I've been abused as a child, and this is a bad example, but assume if I've been abused as a child, do you think I'll look at, child, like any issue around that in a positive light? It's very difficult. And sometimes, even if there's some positive outcome that can come out of the data I'm looking at, if I look at it from the lenses of my pain, sometimes I'm not able to see those things. And so it is important for you to realize your biases and also to look at other people's interpretation of data so that you are not misjudging data from your own biases. The other thing is that some people come to interpret data with preconceived ideas, and this happens a lot in government. So government, for example, because of the nature of being political, they will tell you something like, we have increased the number of young people that go to school. But if you just leave it at that, you're giving a false picture. Why? Because you need to look deeply at, okay, but by the fact that you have free primary education, for example, has everything about education changed? You may have increased the number of children going to school, but is the quality good? And what governments tend to do is, because of political reasons, they will not say what is not working. They will conceal it. But if you're to be a true analyst and strategist, you must look at everything, all the aspects, and you must be open to what the data is saying rather than bring preconceived ideas. So those are things that you must pay attention to when you're working with data. Ebenezer, do you want to say something? Ebenezer Davis, do you want to say something? Okay. So I think we've covered this issue about assumptions and biases. And we said that this issue about assumption and biases is about interpretation and misinterpretation of information. And I think we have covered quite a bit of that. We said that there are several types of biases. Who can unpack for me any of these biases? Okay, can I pick people? Tafazwa, do you want to type in or say something about any of these biases? Rafeka, you haven't spoken. Have you spoken today? Can't remember. Onilude. At least I've heard Kamara's voice. Linda, I haven't heard your voice. John Bonye, I haven't heard your voice. Gaye. Bamaze, I haven't heard your voice. Toga, I haven't heard your voice. Abaneza, you made one contribution from Ethiopia. So I'm asking, does anybody have any, like, what is your definition of a historical bias, observer expectancy bias, group bias, context bias? Just try. It's the hints are on the names.
All right, thank you. So I'll try for historical bias.
Okay.
So a historical bias basically is when we use when we let what happened in the past dictate what is going to happen in the future. So if we look at situations based on what happened before, then we'll have a historical bias.
Yes. So give us an example, Rafeka.
Say if we say in the year when we're having elections, the fuel prices were going down. So I think in the next election, people will have a bias of thinking, oh, because now it's election time, fuel prices may actually have to go down.
Oh, wow. Which country is that where election prices go down? They should come to your country. Where are you from, Rebecca?
From Zambia.
Oh my God, I must.
Yeah, so in Zambia, in Zambia, we always have these situations whereby whenever it's close to election times, money will be allocated to fuel prices, so that they try to bring the number down to win votes.
Yeah, because then I can see the psychology there. So that you want to make people feel like, oh, this government is good. It makes our
exactly.
Now in Kenya, it's the opposite. You've seen we've been queuing for fuel, eh? And but the interesting thing, what they're trying to do, in my view, is that it's not that there's no fuel. They are holding the fuel so that they increase the prices. But I feel like because of how messed up the country has been in terms of debt, I think they're trying to raise campaign financing. So in our case, they usually increase the fuel, and Uganda suffers the most because they have their oil passing through Kenya. So I must move to Zambia, I think. Okay.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
We are living the same thing here with the gas.
Yes.
We are living the same here in Senegal.
Oh, what happened? Oh, you're also queuing for gas?
Yeah, they just said that there were no gas.
Oh no.
And people stayed like for almost a month without gas.
Oh no, yeah, we too.
And when they restart selling it, like the price went from Like it was 2 times expensive.
Oh no. And now, yeah, have you noticed, I don't know, Kamara, in your country, but in ours, now that the fuel has gone up, the prices, now there's more fuel. There's access to more fuel. So that's ridiculous. Yes. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, Rafeka, that historical bias. So for example, in Kenya, we are coming into an election this year. And every time there's an election, there is some cattle rustling increases. There is fuel prices for us increase. So it is an expectation we have. So the year an election happens and the opposite happens, I think there will be what we call cognitive dissonance, meaning confusion, because in the past, things have always been a certain way. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that. Any other explanation for the biases? Toga, talk to me.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Linda.
Yes, good morning, Ma.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the group bias.
Yes.
Okay, the group bias is a situation where you favor one's group, leaving the others.
Sorry, say that again.
I say it's a situation you favor a group, the other.
Okay.
Yes.
That's not quite it. Just give me a minute. So group bias is whereby, is actually the opposite of what you're saying, Linda. It's where you, let's say, like a class like this one, you all think about something the same. But if I think differently, let's say, Linda, if you think differently about the issue, okay, let me give you an example I have observed in young people. I don't know, I can't ask you, but like when I have talked to young people about sexual reproductive health, 100 or 9, at least 90% or 95% think that they should have premarital sex, okay, before marriage. Okay, before marriage, okay. So if I had a physical conversations with you, I would ask, just close your eyes and give me a show of hands. But so if you're in that class and or in that group, but you strongly feel that people should, for example, wait for marriage before they have sex, you may feel ashamed to put your hand up because you don't want to be the odd one out. You don't want to stand out as being backward or not, modern. So you will not say anything and you will pretend that you agree with what the group is saying. So that's a group bias. The group bias is where you withhold your opinion because the popular opinion is saying one thing. Okay, that's the group bias. Okay, Tafazwa, you wanted to say something about group bias, and you say there are people to agree and those disagree to certain issues, and it's difficult to reach a point. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Linda. I've seen your point. Yeah, so group bias is where you go with what the majority are saying because you're afraid to stand out. Okay. What is the context bias or situational bias? Situational bias is where something like during COVID, it's like you're in that situation at that moment. And so that context is influencing the way you're thinking about everything. You're thinking about everything on the basis of COVID or on the basis of sickness or viruses or, because that's what is intensely happening at that point in time. So that's what we call a context bias. Observer expectancy is very easy. There are people, for example, let's say like, and this happens, let's say like if your country is going through an election, you realize that depending on the side of the divide, and you watch this a lot during the American elections, like if they are voting for, it depends. If the Democrats, always their polls are favoring the side of Democrats. And if they do, the Fox side does the same, or rather the conservative side does the same poll, they always make the conservative side win. But what is the problem? Is it that the data is changing? No, it's because the people observing or the people doing the data analysis are, in a sense, expecting to win. Like, depending on the side you're favoring, you're working backwards. You're saying, we must win. Therefore, we work backwards to make sure that the polls say we are winning the elections. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
as an observer, you're using the data to say what you want, rather than what is the truth on the ground. So that's what is observer expectancy. You're biasing the data. You're making the data say the world is black, even if the world is black, white, red, yellow, whatever. Okay. So and then we went into some of the futures tools, and we started, like I said, with scenarios building. Can anybody remember what scenarios building is about? Okay, what are some of the tools we learned? Let me see who hasn't spoken. Onilude, I've never heard your voice. Gaye, have I heard your voice today? Gloria, I don't think I've heard your voice. Toga, you can write on the chat, and then Hernaina will interpret for me. Ebenezer, what are some of the tools we've learned? What is scenarios thinking?
Doc, Francisca,
Yes. Yes, Francisca.
So from what I understood, scenario means using your imagination to create a situation which is not actually there.
Okay. And you create many, not one, isn't it?
Yes.
You're imagining different probabilities. What is the possible scenario that could happen? You're creating a picture of what could happen, but it's not one. You're creating many pictures that could happen. And so there are stories about the future, stories, not story. So sometimes, based on the patterns you observe, one can ask, what is the worst case scenario? So let's go back to the issue of Tanzania's food security. Using that information, you can ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario that can happen? And you start describing the worst case scenario, right? You describe maybe children with malnutrition, people cannot afford food, most households are going hungry, you see? And that's a possibility based on the data we have seen. But what if the government realizes that things are, might be like that, and they put in, let's say, policies around, stop subdividing land, start urban farming, start, I don't know, exporting more food or whatever, processing more food, what is there, what will happen in that future? So you can create a best case scenario based on decisions that can be made, all right? And say, if they were to lower prices, or if they were to document or put policies around this is what the future might look like. And it's a wonderful tool to use for decision making, particularly for policy making, and even for businesses and profits. And so I gave you an example of how you can do this. You can create a table and ask yourself, if there's high unemployment, what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And we were saying that in the worst cases, even in negative issues like high unemployment, there are still nice things that could happen. But then you have to figure out what's the decision that has to be made for a certain condition to occur. So if we want to say that our best case scenario is having less young people out of a job, what decisions does government or people have to make sure that that happens in the future? And remember the example I gave you. The situation you're realizing right now did not happen by accident. It's a fact of the history. So our youth unemployment is a fact of, is as a result of us not planning for the number of children that were being born in the 1980s. Okay. So similarly, if we want the future to look like it for young people to be employed in the future, so what decisions must we make now? What kind of education system must we have? What kind of, young people, what kind of a mindset must they have? So that we can create a world where young people are working. And it doesn't mean that work needs to be the way it is fashioned now. How can we reimagine what work will look like? Some people will say, by the way, we don't need people going to work from 8 to 5. We need to have barter trade. And barter trade ensures that I produce, let's say, tomatoes, you produce the vegetables like, let's say, kale and spinach. Tafazwa, for example, grows the wheat, and Gloria grows the maize, and Gaia grows tries to grow the sunflowers that will give us the fat. And if we all specialize, then we all exchange, no one will ever lack food. Maybe that's food production reimagined, but it has to reimagine a different future, but also reimagine different ways of doing things for us to realize that future. Is it making sense?
Yes, Doc.
Yeah, okay, good job. So that's scenarios, and it's a very interesting process. Then we went into systems thinking, and in systems thinking, we started talking about, who remembers what systems thinking is? And we've talked about it this morning. Surely, those of you who don't have any points, this is where because you already know, you can quickly speak so that you get your points. Or write on the chat. What is systems thinking? Lawrence, even you can participate. Nobody? Oh my goodness, nobody knows systems thinking? Who remembers this exercise?
I remember.
Okay, what did we do?
I think system thinking is, it's like the succession of the la succession des actions en anglais. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm losing the word. Like the interaction of the things and the situations, maybe. Because when we were doing the exercise, we proceed about how to the system of making the tea, where did we start and how it was going since we finished the tea.
Yeah. So it's like you are trying to understand how something works.
I'm sorry, my English.
No, don't worry about it. I'm really glad that you're actually really trying, Tamara. Actually, you will get 2 points for that one. Yeah. So I can see, Tafazwa, what you're saying. It's for ways to maximize effectiveness in programming. And you want to do that by looking at how something works. Okay. What are the elements? How does it interact with one another? So for example, if you're making a cup of tea, it just depends on your preference, or even a cup of coffee. Some people will put, milk and water in the fire. Then some people even put sugar, others leave it. Then you put the tea leaves. Then some people put spices, then you bring it to boil, then you sieve it and put it in a cup, and then it's ready to drink. So depending on your culture, wherever you're coming from. But we said this is a very linear way of thinking about a process, okay, how things work together. Because remember that this cup of tea, there's the place where the water is coming from. There's a whole other structure about the milk. There's a whole other system happening when it comes to the production of this pot. There's another system here about energy. So making a cup of tea is never about the water, the milk, or the sugar or the spices. It's about all these systems. You remember? And the system then becomes, sorry, I have that. The system then becomes, how does the energy sector look like? How does it work until it brings the fire to your house? How does, for example, the water system work until it is accessible for you to be able to make a cup of tea? What is the milk, process like until it gets for you to be able to buy? For example, in West Africa, I know you may be milk producers, but a lot of it comes from, especially the ones that were colonized by France, a lot of it comes from as milk powder from France, okay? So what is that system like? And does it make milk more expensive? Oh, sorry, Kamara. Does it make milk more expensive, okay? So systems thinking is about exactly what Afazwa is saying. It's about understanding the processes that are at work in an issue. And it's because of understanding those processes that you unpack where are the systems going wrong.
Is there a reason why it's done?
Okay. Sorry, Rebecca, your microphone is on. Yeah. So so you must understand all those issues because it can help you locate where the problem is and how to solve a problem. So a cup of tea is a simple way of saying, if you're working, for example, on unemployment, you must unpack what are the processes and the systems that are going into causing you high youth unemployment. And we did say that sometimes we think it's young people, but perhaps the solution is actually in maybe, John, your microphone is on. Somebody mute John for me. Yeah, so you may think that in this problem that you're solving, sometimes you think the problem is in one place, but if you do a systems analysis, you realize that the problem is in an entirely different place. And so this is a very nice process of trying to understand your problem, but also trying to innovate solutions. And it has been vouched as one of the best 21st century ways of thinking about problem solving and innovation in anything. Okay. Yeah, every product has a starting point and a process, and systems thinking is one of the ones that I would really encourage you to read about. And basically what we are also saying is that different issues are at different levels. There are simple problems like making a cup of tea, but there are others that are complicated, like going to space, but there are others that are complex, like raising a child. And so you must understand, obviously, this is not a straightforward thing like making a cup of tea. And so understanding the system and the processes that are at work really helps you to be able to get very innovative solutions for some of the challenges that we are talking about. So that was systems thinking, and I had given you an assignment to just say, it's good to think about the issue you're dealing with. Describe the system, describe the things that are at play in the process of your system. And then what are the parts, how are they working? What are the rules of the game? So, and you will begin to understand that in your problem, maybe the biggest issue is policy. And we did compare, for example, education of girls in, let's say, Central Africa and in Southern Africa. You may have the same problem, but because of the different contexts, they completely work out differently. So in Central Africa, it might be religion and belief systems, while in Southern Africa, it is really an issue of poverty. So understanding problems from that systems perspective really helps when it comes to designing solutions. So that was one, and I'm expecting to see some sort of systems analysis in your work, okay? And then there's what we call the gap analysis. And the gap analysis is really once you've understood your problem and you really have your best case scenario, which is the desired state, you need to understand what is the gap, what space needs to be filled. And here you begin to put in your design your solution, which is design thinking type of work. You want to start saying, okay, for me to move from this bad state to this best case, and I have used all these tools to try and understand my situation, then what is the data telling me that the solution must be? Okay, and that's what we call a gap analysis. And I had given you a template. By answering these questions, you can be able, and by using the tools that we have already talked about to look at the challenge, your scenarios can give you what a best case scenario needs to look like. Then you can begin to deduce some of these things that you need as designing the solutions. We also worked through, I believe it's last week, but one, the SWOT analysis as well, and the PESTEL analysis as tools to be able to help you with your gaps analysis. And for this, we are saying what are the weaknesses, the strengths, the opportunities we're observing, and the threats, but also what are the political, if you look at that problem from a political perspective, how does it manifest itself? When you look at the same problem from an economics perspective or from a social or a technological, and with this, you're able to unpack the problem with a much wider lens than if you just look at the problem from your interpretation or from the interpretation of the person who is experiencing the problem. So those are ways in which you try and get a solution. But last week we talked about the causal layered analysis. And this is another way of looking at issues. And we talked about a lot of times we unpack things from an events perspective, but we must think about issues as patterns and behavior. And I already gave you tools for this. Patterns and behavior is your trends analysis. Structure and system is your systems analysis. Mental models is about people and how they interpret things and their own experiences, their biases, and so forth. And so this, basically what I've been teaching you is unpacking problems from this causal layered analysis so that you fully understand what the issue looks like. What did we say about the iceberg? This is called the iceberg analogy. What did we say is an important thing about the iceberg? If you remember, we watched the Titanic. For those who are in class, what did we deduce about the iceberg? What did we say is one of the characteristics of an iceberg? And it's even seen in this picture. Guys, what made the Titanic fall apart? What was the nature of the iceberg? Are people still on the call? Hello? Hi, everybody. Rigobert is saying that the underlying structure might be bigger, yes, than what we see. And so sometimes when you look at an issue from a linear perspective, you miss the point that the issue is deeper than you think. And so that's why you must unpack all these things. Thanks, Rigobert, that you get your point for that. And so that's why we have to look at things from this perspective. And I think everything we have talked about, from the trends to systems analysis to biases, it covers your way of looking at things from this causal layered analysis. So once you have fully understood your problem, so what? And I conclude by saying that you consolidate that information, and with your gaps analysis, design the required solutions. And designing the required solutions is also about what we have been taught in Pink Place, that you go back with all this information and you now try and sit down and design. Okay, Tafazo, I can see your internet is acting up, I'm sorry. So you try and design a solution, okay? Design the solution. So this is where I hand you over back to Think Place. And Think Place, I think once they come on board, you'll be able to now then fully know how to design the solution to your problem. So that's the end of my presentation, guys. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm hoping I'll see a lot of these things in your work as we go along. Any questions from me? Hernaina, how are we doing? Sawa, okay. Rigobati, I can see what I can give you. Okay, thank you very much. Lawrence, do I hand over the meeting back to you?
Yeah. So just want to also say thank you for today. As usual, we'll look at the training calendar. I was just looking at it. There's one session, I think it's for us, not you. So
Yeah.
hopefully you're done with module 2.
Yes, I am.
I don't know if we'll have to meet for module 3, but yeah, it's something we can discuss.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. But now my sessions, I think, as you have seen, are completely over, right? Longview. Yeah. So thank you, guys. You guys have been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful students, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Dr. Katingi. She's completely completed the module 2 for us. It's actually been a wonderful journey, a wonderful learning journey. And I hope we all took something really serious from module 2 that we can use moving forward, especially as we go about developing our projects. But thank you so much, Dr. Katingi. We will keep talking bilaterally and see, just how we can further move forward as we continue this training. So, colleagues, we want to end here for today, and also say thank you to Hernaina, who has been there all through this while. We will communicate the next step for module 3. That is if we are not able to do the last session for module 2. That is for us, AOI. So thank you so much. Have yourself a wonderful Saturday.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Lawrence. And yes,
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Francisca. Bye, everybody.